The jealous cousin pushed her into the river to die. But the reason behind that act is darker and sadder than anyone could imagine. Amina and Zawadi weren't just cousins. They were raised like sisters, bound by blood and childhood memories. Yet, while Amina's heart was full of kindness, Zawadi's slowly filled with envy, the kind that hides behind smiles until one day it can no longer stay hidden. That envy led her, one quiet morning, to the edge of the bridge where everything changed. With trembling hands and a heart hardened by years of bitterness, Zawadi pushed her cousin into the rushing river below. She stood frozen, watching as the water swallowed Amina whole. Then she walked back to the village with tears on her face and a lie ready on her tongue. She said it was an accident, an awful, tragic accident. Everyone believed her. Who could ever suspect such cruelty from someone who had always lived so close, shared so much, and smiled so sweetly? But what no one knew was that this wasn't a crime born from sudden anger. It was the final result of a lifetime of comparison, of living in another's light. This is the story of how jealousy grows when love is uneven, and how the smallest seed of comparison can turn into poison. To truly understand what happened that day, we need to return to where their story began, back to the same small house, the same straw mat where they slept side by side, two little girls with the same dreams. Amina and Zawadi shared everything: their food, their laughter, even the bedtime stories whispered by their grandmother as the fire crackled in the corner. But though they shared a roof, fate never treated them equally. From a young age, people noticed Amina first. The warmth of her smile, the light in her eyes, the way she made others feel seen. When she carried water for an old neighbor, the villagers praised her kindness. When Zawadi did the same, they only said, "She's trying to be like Amina." At first, it was just small things. But like a crack in an old wall, the difference widened slowly, quietly, until it became impossible to ignore. Their grandmother often said that Amina had blessed hands and a peaceful voice. And soon, everyone in the village repeated those words like they were truth carved in stone. Zawadi would listen in silence, her heart tightening with every compliment that wasn't meant for her. She wasn't bad, just unseen. She began to ask herself questions that no one could answer. Why not me? Why does no one see what I do? Why is love only hers? Their mother tried to keep peace between them, but even her kindness leaned toward Amina. When Amina fell sick, she'd pray all night beside her bed. But when Zawadi caught a fever, she'd leave medicine and go about her chores as if it didn't matter. That was when Zawadi learned to smile without feeling it, to hide her jealousy behind politeness, to laugh at her cousin's jokes while her heart burned quietly inside. Amina, too pure to notice, thought her cousin was simply quiet and shy. Years passed. The girls grew into women, but the shadow between them never faded. At the market, when Amina arrived, men straightened their backs and smiled. Women greeted her warmly, and children ran to her side. Zawadi would walk behind her, dressed neatly, but almost invisible. One afternoon, she overheard someone whisper, "She's beautiful, yes, but she doesn't shine like her cousin." That whisper stayed with her. From that moment, admiration turned into resentment, and the wound in her chest hardened into a thorn. The cruel part was that Amina never noticed. She still called Zawadi her soul sister, still shared her gifts, still saved the ripest fruits for her cousin. Her love was like a mirror, showing Zawadi everything she wished to be and everything she never could. Every kind gesture from Amina, every laugh, every shared secret only deepened the pain. One afternoon by the river, as they washed clothes together, Amina's reflection shimmered on the surface. The sun hit her hair just right, and for a moment she looked almost holy. Zawadi stared and thought, why did God make her so loved? Did he forget about me? That question took root in her heart, and it never left. From that day, the cousins seemed close as ever, walking arm in arm through the village, but inside, a wall stood between them. Everyone saw their closeness, but few noticed the heaviness in Zawadi's eyes. When people praised Amina, Zawadi smiled and agreed. Yes, my cousin truly is a blessing. But inside, those words felt like knives. Every time Amina shone brighter, Zawadi felt herself dimmer, smaller, erased. At night, Zawadi would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft breathing of her cousin beside her. Sometimes she would stand at the window, watching the river flow under the moonlight, wondering if peace would ever visit her heart. But it never did. Amina trusted her completely, sharing every dream and hope. One night, while they sat embroidering by lamplight, Amina said softly, I believe God has a beautiful plan for both of us, Zawadi. Maybe one day our homes will stand side by side. The words were innocent, full of love. But to Zawadi, they sounded like mockery. She knew her house, her life, her future would always be smaller. The more the village admired Amina, the more Zawadi's envy consumed her. When young men stopped to talk with Amina, she would walk over smiling, pretending to join in. But every smile was a mask, every laugh a lie. Inside, she feared becoming invisible forever. One day during harvest, Amina gave a bunch of ripe mangoes to a boy who'd helped her. He smiled gratefully. Zawadi saw it, and later teased, "You're so kind, it almost looks like you're in love with every man in the village." Amina just laughed, replying, "Those who plant kindness harvest love, Zawadi." Those words replayed endlessly in Zawadi's mind, not as wisdom, but as insult. Love, what she had never received. That night, jealousy became something living inside her, whispering to her heart. Days went by, and Zawadi became even more attentive, helping Amina with chores, pretending care. But behind the kindness was calculation. Behind the smiles, watching eyes. When their mother once said, "Zawadi, you should learn from Amina. She was born with a clean heart," it burned through her like fire. A clean heart, and hers? Was it dirty, stained? The question haunted her. The jealousy grew wild, like weeds choking every good thing left inside her. And though no one saw it, the river did. The river that had always listened to their laughter now sensed the darkness forming. Some feelings, when trapped too long, become destiny. It was on a golden evening that destiny came calling. The sun dipped low behind the mountains, and the market filled with songs, scents, and laughter. Amina was there, as always, helping the elder women organize the stalls, when a stranger appeared. His name was Cato, a man with a calm voice, steady gaze, and calloused hands that spoke of a life of hard work. He had come from a distant village to trade cattle, but he quickly drew attention not for what he sold, but for the respectful way he looked people in the eye. They said Cato was different from the other men in the region. He wasn't swayed by appearances and treated everyone with the same respect. Whether it was the village chief or the boy cleaning the market floor when he saw Amina for the first time, it was as if time stood still. She was distracted, holding a bundle of corn, her loose hair brushing her face, her soft laughter escaping without intent. Cato stood frozen, unsure if he was admiring her beauty or the purity in her gesture. And in that moment, something began to shift, not just between the two of them, but also within Zawadi, who watched from afar with a tight chest. That night, the whole village talked about the stranger. The women said he was a man of worth, and the men praised his honesty. But it was Amina who stood out most in their conversations. Cato sought to know her better, and little by little, they began seeing each other often. He helped carry heavy baskets, walked with Amina to Theriver, and on calmer afternoons, sat with her in the shade of the mango tree to hear her stories about childhood days. It was a simple kind of love made of glances and silences of small gestures that spoke louder than words. Zawadi noticed every meeting, every smile exchanged. At first, she pretended acting happy, saying things like, "You to make a beautiful couple." But inside, her heart was cracking. Childhood memories returned like reopened wounds. The comparisons, the favoritism, the praise. Now, even the love she had once hoped to receive was slipping into Amina's hands. At night, alone, she cried in silence, cursing herself for feeling jealous, yet unable to fight it. With time, Cato began spending more time at the cousin's home. He brought fruit, helped with the harvests, and without realizing it, he filled the space between the two girls with attention no one dared to name. Amina was happy, glowing like never before. Zawadi, more distant each day, hid her pain under a veil of politeness. One afternoon, while Cato and Amina chatted beneath the tree, Zawadi watched from the window. The golden sunset bathed her cousin's face, and her smile seemed to shine brighter than the sun itself. In that instant, something broke inside Zawadi for good. That same night, she knelt before the small oil lamp and tried to pray, but no words came out. She could only whisper, "Why not me, Lord? Why all was her?" Silence was her only answer, and in that silence, a bitter promise was born, that she would never again be left behind. The days that followed were a mix of pretending and torment. Zawadi began approaching Cato, looking for any excuse to talk. She spoke sweetly, praised his stories, tried to figure out what he saw in Amina that he didn't see in anyone else. Cato, naive, thought she only wanted friendship. But Amina began to notice her cousin's unease, the lingering gaze, the tone of voice that sounded different. Even without understanding, something in her began to ache, a premonition, perhaps that the harmony between them was about to break. At the market, the whispers began. People said Cato would soon ask for Amina's hand in marriage, and the village filled with joy at the news. Everyone looked forward to the celebration, the dancing, the blessings. Everyone except Zawadi. Because while her cousin's love blossomed, hers withered before it even had a chance to grow. And it was then, in the depths of her wounded heart, that a shadow began to grow. A shadow made of jealousy and silence. A shadow that sooner or later would find the river. The plan was born on a silent night, when Zadi stared at the trembling flame of the oil lamp, as if hearing an ancient command. She decided it had to be something simple, natural, something that would raise no suspicion. The next morning, she appeared in the kitchen with a gentle smile and a soft suggestion. "The white flowers have bloomed near the river. I heard they bring good luck when picked at dawn. Let's gather some to decorate the house for when Ko comes." Amina, suspecting nothing, agreed with joy. And just like that, the trap dressed itself in tenderness. They left early, their feet still wet with dew. The path seemed the same as always. Birds above, the smell of earth, the murmur of running water. Amina spoke shyly about marriage, as if afraid to scare away happiness. Zawadi answered with short, sweetened phrases. Inside her chest, guilt and jealousy wrestled like two chained dogs. Every word her cousin spoke about the future was a nail, and every childhood memory, the comparisons, the praise, the brightness of others became a hammer. When they reached the wooden bridge, Theriver flowed gently, but beneath it was a hidden strength. Amina leaned over to look at the flowers along the bank and laughed. "Look, Sadie, they're even prettier than last year." Amina's laughter had no idea of the darkness surrounding it. Zadi took a deep breath, as if trying to draw courage from one last sip of air. For a moment, she almost gave up. She wanted to say, "Let's go home," to confess the weight in her chest, to cry. But the memory of Kato, the memory of a lifetime spent being second, pushed her toward the edge of the abyss she had dug for herself. Their conversation fell into an uneasy silence. Amina, sensing the tension, gently touched her cousin's hand. "Zuidi, I want you to know nothing that happens to me has any joy if you're not well." Those simple, sincere words were the last mercy before the fall. Zuidi closed her eyes for a second. Inside her, something replied, "Now it's too late." She opened them again, cold, resigned, stepped behind her cousin, and in a swift motion pushed. Amina's body lost the ground beneath her and hit the water with a dull sound, splitting Theriver's mirror. There was a brief moment of flailing arms, a drowned cry, and then the current took control. Zoadi froze, her hands still outstretched, as if trying to pull back the act that could no longer be undone. "I mean," she cried, but the cry came out low, almost a frightened whisper. The river answered with small whirlpools like eyes closing. The current dragged Dina under the bridge, then onward, where the water ran stronger. Zawadi wanted to run along the bank, but her legs refused. She took 2 steps, stumbled, fell to her knees. There, kneeling on the wooden planks, she tried to pray, but no prayer came. All she could do was clasp her hands and murmur, "Forgive me." The wind lifted the hair from her face, as if wanting to see her better, as if all of nature wished to record that portrait of guilt. Eternal minutes passed before Zawadi stood and ran back to the village. She entered the main path, sobbing, repeating that it had been an accident that Amina had slipped. People came out of their homes. Men ran toward the bridge. Women covered their heads with cloths. The messenger's drum called for help. Ni appeared barefoot, her face pale with fear, asking for her daughter. Zawadi threw herself into her arms, crying like a victim of her own deed. And the village, unaware of what had truly happened, believed her. All day they searched the river banks, turned over stones, cast their nets, but the river kept its silence. Kato arrived drenched in sweat, his clothes clinging to his body, his voice breaking as he called Amina's name. He searched until nightfall, calling for her as if his voice could bring her back from the depths. When night came, the village surrendered to mourning and vigil, each house lit by a single lamp, each heart tied in a knot. Xiao. I sat at the doorway motionless, staring at the stars. Her face had no more tears, only emptiness. On the silence of the night, she heard again the words Amina had said on the bridge. "Nothing that happens to him has any joy if you're not well." Those words returned like a haunting, as if the river were bringing them back in waves. Zapati realized that in taking her cousin's future, she had also taken from herself her last chance at peace. And while the village prayed for a body, she understood that what had truly died that day was her own soul. The next dawn fell over the village like a veil of sorrow. The river still flowed calmly, but along its banks there was only the sound of weeping. Men with poles and nets searched for the body, while the women whispered quiet prayers, asking that Amina's spirit find rest. Zawadi stood among them, a black scarf over her head, red eyes, her body trembling in tears. No one suspected a thing. Everyone believed the pain she showed was genuine, and perhaps it was, not for the loss itself, but for the weight of guilt that had begun to seep into her like a sickness. In the first few days, the whole village united in mourning. Amina's grandmother sank into deep silence, refusing food. Near-eye her mother, moved like a shadow, repeating her daughter's name in short, broken prayers. "Amina, my light, come back, Tom, come back." The sound of those words made Zav's chest ache in a way she could barely endure. Pretending to be in pain was easy. What tore her apart was feeling real pain, the kind that comes when the evil we've done starts whispering inside the soul. The body never appeared. The river, which had always returned what it took, kept its secret this time. That deepened the mystery, and the mystery became legend. Some said the river had carried Amina straight into God's arms. Others said the spirits of the waters had chosen her to live among them. But for Zawadi, every passing current was a reminder of her crime. She began to avoid the sound of water, closing windows when the wind came from the south where the river ran. At night, she dreamed of wet footsteps crossing her room and would wake screaming, calling her cousin's name. Cato, shattered by grief, wandered the riverbank every day. Sometimes he sat on the bridge and spoke aloud as if Amina could still hear him. He said he would keep waiting, that love does not die with the water. Zawadi watched from afar, her heart tight with a mixture of remorse and longing. She knew he would never look at her the way he looked at her cousin, and so began a new phase of her life. The phase of complete pretense that she started caring for, near helping with chores, visiting the empty grave they had built for A, and praying every day on her knees, uttering words that sounded holy but came from a mouth marked by sin. As months passed, mourning turned into routine. People returned to the market. Children's laughter echoed again in the afternoons, and grief was tucked away in the drawers of time. Only Zavad's face stayed pale. She had lost weight. Her laughter had become forced, and her eyes revealed an unrest that even tears could not conceal. Sometimes as she walked through the village, the women praised her for her strength and faith. "It's admirable," they'd say. Even after losing her cousin, she remained strong, and Zawadi would simply lower her head, ashamed to be admired for what she had destroyed. One day, Cato found her by the riverbank. It was late afternoon, and the sky glowed copper. He approached slowly and said in a weary voice, "I still can't believe she's gone. The river took everything from me." Zawadi took a deep breath and replied, "Maybe the river takes what we can't hold on to." Cato looked at her, searching for comfort but found only distance. Neither of them spoke again, and in that silence, Zawadi realized that even Cato's attention felt more like punishment than a gift. As the years passed, Zawadi learned to sustain the role she had created. She joined in celebrations, worked in the fields, even smiled. But in the middle of the night, she would feel the river calling. The sound of the water had become like a living voice, repeating Amina's name, asking for answers, demanding confession. And the more she tried to bury the past, the more the past dug beneath her feet. In the village, no one spoke of the tragedy aloud anymore. They said only that God had taken Amina to a better place. But the children, when passing near the bridge, whispered, "That's where the spirit of the kind girl lives." And sometimes they swore they heard soft laughter coming from the river. Zawadi, however, was never free again. She had become a prisoner of an invented grief, condemned to weep in public and to punish herself in secret. The river had taken Amina, but it had left something far heavier behind. The punishment of staying alive, carrying the weight of a crime that time would never erase. And deep down, perhaps that was the truest punishment of all. To live pretending to miss what, in truth, she herself had destroyed. When the current grew tired of wrestling with Amina's body, fate, or perhaps mercy, changed direction. Many hours later, beneath the large rocks where the river swirled into whirlpools, two fishermen from another village, Mosey and Baraka, spotted a blue cloth tangled in the reeds. They brought their boat closer and saw what looked like a sleeping young woman, pale as if the water had drained all the color from the world. Mosey, the older of the two, placed a hand on her chest and murmured a proverb his father had once taught him. "As long as there is breath, the earth still calls there was breath." Faint, but it was there. They brought Amina to shore and covered her with rough blankets. The sun was already saying goodbye when they knocked on the door of Mama. A widow known for caring for those life had knocked down. She opened the door, saw the half-conscious girl, and asked no questions. She simply ordered hot water, prepared a salve from leaves, and laid a warm cloth on the stranger's forehead. The night passed in a rhythm of short breaths, whispered prayers, and the crackling of fire. When Amina finally opened her eyes, she recognized neither the ceiling above her, nor the hands holding her, nor even her own name. They tried to remind her of something, but her memory was a field covered in fog. In the days that followed, Mama Titha called the young woman Nima, meaning grace. until one day her memory decided to return. Nima walked through the house like someone stepping on new ground, slowly touching the walls, listening to every sound to avoid getting lost. Her body bore scratches, and her head throbbed whenever she tried to recall the past. Sometimes tears would rise for no reason and fall silently down her cheeks. Other times she'd nibble on a piece of bread and smile, as if surprised to discover that life could still have taste. The villagers were wary of the quiet stranger, but their respect for Mama Titha silenced any wicked tongue. Nima began helping with small tasks, washing bowls, sweeping the yard, tending the chickens. At dusk, she would sit at the door and listen to the widows sing old songs about women the river tried to take but failed. Dot in those songs lived a thread of faith that stitched each day. Together, God visits the house where there is water and patience, Mama Talitha would say, serving a warm bowl of broth. Nima didn't yet know who God was, but she embraced the bowl as one would embrace a mother's lap. One morning, Baraka brought her a notebook and a piece of charcoal, hoping her memory might find its way through writing. Nima scribbled curves that looked like letters, but no words made sense. Still, something in her began to settle. She made friends with a clever girl named Sifu, who sold fried cakes in the village square. They walked together by the calm riverbank, though Nima, without knowing why, avoided getting too close to the water. Dot. A chill would crawl up her neck like the warning of a coming storm. Flashes came to her in bursts. Wooden planks of a bridge, a sweet laugh, a hand touching hers, and then the world turning upside down. In those moments, she would retreat, breathing deep, like someone pushing against a door that still refused to open. The months passed, marked by small miracles. Nima learned to weave mats, gathered medicinal leaves, and shared shy laughter under the moonlight. Dot Mama Talitha, who understood the weight of a life stitched back together, used to say that some people are reborn slowly, like a fire catching in damp wood. The important thing is that it still warms, she'd say. And Nima brought warmth to the home with her quiet presence and attentive hands, though the past stayed outside like a persistent stray dog. Peace had found a chair on the porch. One late afternoon, while sifting maize, a gust of wind carried the distant sound of celebratory drums. Nema froze. The sieve held midair, and a name broke inside her like a seed splitting open. Amina. The word both hurt and glowed. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt it belonged to her. That night, she dreamed of a blue dress and a voice saying, "Nothing that happens to me has any joy if you're not well." She woke up with a wet face, her hands gripping the sheet as if they held another hand. When morning came, she asked Mama Titha to take her to the riverbank. They stood in silence, watching the water continue on its path. And Nima understood whatever her story had been. She still had legs to walk. It wasn't the end. It was a beginning. One of those quiet ones. Life writes without asking permission. Her memory would return when it was ready. Until then, she would be the daughter of that house, the work of that table, the prayer under that roof. Because sometimes, to remember who we are, we must first learn how to live again. Time passed with the slow patience of someone healing an old wound. Years blended together like rivers meeting in the rainy season, and in Mama Titha's village, Nima, now once again called Amina, was seen as one of their own. Her memory returned in fragments. A smiling face, the shimmer of a bridge, the sound of laughter that ended in a scream. On certain nights, Amina woke drenched in sweat, her heart pounding like a drum. And in every dream, the same name appeared, distant at first. Then clear as a bird's song, Awadi I do. It was on a harvest afternoon that the truth began to take shape. Amina was alone in the field when she saw a group of travelers passing with oxen and carts. One of them stopped to ask for water, and upon hearing her voice turned pale. He was a merchant from the village of Kimbala, her birthplace. Unaware of who she was, he spoke about the place and its stories, about the kind young woman who had vanished into the river. The cousin who wept inconsolably and a man named Kuthu had married that same cousin, years later. Amina stood silent, the water jar trembling in her hands. When the man left, she sat on the ground, her gaze lost. The memories returned like a flood. The bridge, the push, the cold water, the betrayal. That night, she told everything to Mama Talith. The old woman listened, eyes shining with tears, and said only, "Child, destiny always turns in circles, but it never forgets where it began." Amina spent days in silence, torn between fear and courage. The anger she felt upon remembering her cousin soon gave way to something emptier, the hollow ache of an unanswered question. Why? Why would someone she loved so deeply want her dead? When she finally decided to leave, her heart was heavy, but her soul demanded balance. She said goodbye to Mama Talitha with a long embrace. "You gave me a second life," said Amina, the widow replied. "Then live it with the truth that belongs to you." She set out wearing simple clothes, carrying only a small cloth bag and a wooden cross that had given her for protection. The road to Kimbala felt longer than she remembered. The trees seemed taller, the houses smaller, and the wind carried the scent of the same river that had nearly taken her. When she reached the village gate, night had already fallen. She pulled her hood low and watched from a distance. Everything looked the same, but the people had aged. The market was quieter, the voices slower. No one recognized her, and for a brief moment she was grateful for that. Amina walked to the house where she had grown up. The walls were stained, the gate rusted. Inside, she heard children laughing, and a woman's voice, tired but familiar, peering through the window. She saw Zui, now a grown woman, her face marked by wrinkles, her eyes dull. Beside her played two small children, the ones she'd had with Kato. Amina felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She stood there, frozen, watching her heart torn between pain and pity. Kato entered the house carrying a bundle of firewood. His hair was gray, the years heavy on him. Yet his posture remained firm. He greeted Zoe without affection, more out of duty than love. Between them hung a silence that time could not disguise. Amina saw in his empty gaze that the love he once had died with her memory. In the days that followed, Amina stayed in the village, hiding among travelers and market vendors. She watched her cousin's life from afar and listened to what people said. Zodi was respected for her charity, but everyone knew that sorrow lived with her. They said she was haunted by nightmares, that she often woke screaming her cousin's name. People called it divine punishment. Amina walked by the riverbank and saw in the water's reflection the face Zawadi believed she'd destroyed. Each time she looked, she felt less hatred and more pity. She realized that revenge had lost its meaning. She didn't want to ruin her cousin. She only wanted to know if her remorse was real. In the same village where everyone had once mourned her, Amina was now a living ghost. No one suspected that the quiet woman buying vegetables at the market and praying by the river was the same girl fate had once swallowed. And with each passing day, the river felt less like an enemy and more like a witness. The reunion she knew was inevitable. Destiny does not leave stories unfinished without demanding the final stitch. And though fear tried to stop her, something inside Amina, perhaps faith, perhaps justice, pushed her forward because her return was not vengeance. It was reckoning, the moment when truth would rise to the surface, just as she once had from the waters. Zavi's nights were as long as endless roads. When the lamp went out, the river lit up inside her head. The sound of water came as a whisper, and in that whisper, Amina's name, she would wake, drenched in sweat, chest heaving, swearing she'd heard wet footsteps crossing the courtyard. Sometimes she rose and pressed her forehead against the cold wooden door, asking the darkness to forgive her for a sin no one knew how to name. Her body had aged before its time, deep circles under her eyes, gray hairs that had appeared from one year to the next, hands trembling as she served her children their porridge. Kato noticed her decline and thought it was only old sadness. He tried to get close, but their marriage was made of silences. Two boats that could see each other but never touched. In the beginning, Zawadi had given him children, warm meals, a tidy house. She'd given everything one could give except her heart. With time, care became habit, and habit became distance. Kadawari began to come home late, to speak little, to sleep turned away. There were no fights, only the emptiness that settles in when truth becomes a guest no one invites. But that never leaves. By day, Zawadi kept the appearance of a respected woman. She helped neighbors, donated food, organized prayers. The village praised her charity, and every compliment was salt in her wounds. Because each time someone called her good, a voice inside whispered, "Lies!" That was the cruelest punishment of all, to uphold before the world a holiness her own soul denied, and the weary soul began to collect its dues. Headaches came, loss of appetite, fear of the bridge, dread of hearing children playing near the water. One afternoon, Nero came to visit her grandchildren, and found her daughter standing in the yard, staring at nothing. She touched her shoulder and said, "Zawadi, life feels lighter when we stop hiding its weight." The words hung in the air like laundry on a line, dripping memories. Zawadi smiled faintly, but when she was alone, she collapsed on a bench and buried her face in her hands. The past was not past. It was still there, asking for a name and a face. Soon, stories of haunting spread through the village. People crossing the bridge at night swore they saw a woman in a blue dress by the riverbank. Some said it was memory playing tricks, others that Amina's spirit guarded the place where she had been taken. Zawadi pretended not to listen, but deep down she understood every story as a message. She avoided that path, even if it meant walking far around. Still, the river found her in her dreams, in the bucket that overflowed. In a tune, someone hummed without realizing when Amina returned to the village and began to wander quietly. Zawadi didn't recognize her at first. She only saw a calm-eyed woman buying vegetables, a stranger who prayed by the river, but something in the woman's posture, the way she held her cloth, the way she tilted her head in thanks sent a deep sting through Zadias, if an invisible thread had been pulled tight inside her chest. That night, the nightmare changed color. Shed dreamed of the bridge, of the scent of white flowers, and of a phrase Amina had once said, "Nothing that happens to me has any joy if you're not well." She woke up crying, and for the first time she didn't try to explain why. Her children began to notice. The eldest asked why their mother prayed so often, hugging the bedsheet. Zadi answered that sometimes the heart just needs a lap to rest on. And it was true. She began spending more time at the house of prayer, not to be seen, but because only there could she breathe. She spoke softly with the village elder Baba Chuma, never confessing the secret, but begging for words that could hold her head together from within. He told her, "Who hides a wound feeds a fever." Zawadi would leave those talks on trembling legs, like someone learning to walk again on a rainy afternoon. As she gathered clothes from the line, Zawadi saw beyond the fence the same calm-eyed woman standing in the drizzle. Two worlds collided. The stranger lifted her face, and for a heartbeat, time opened. Zawadi felt the bridge beneath her feet, the water rising, the wind tugging at her scarf. Her legs weakened. Consciousness, which had been haunting her for years, turned into judgment. For the first time since the crime, she understood punishment would not come from outside. She had been serving it all along. Every sleepless night, every tasteless meal, every prayer without peace was the bill that fate had been sending her. And yet, within that fear, a spark flickered, one that felt like hope. Perhaps the truth, if it finally had a name, might return some breath to her mornings. Perhaps the river, if it heard her confession, might bring back to the shore a peace she had long forgotten. Zawadi closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and felt that the time to pay with words was near. Because the punishment of conscience only ends when truth finally finds its voice. It was raining when fate decided to reunite what the river had once torn apart. A soft, steady rain, the kind that seems to wash the dust off the earth and prepare the ground for forgiveness. Zadi sat by the window, sewing in silence. The sound of raindrops on the roof mingled with the crackle of the fire. Her face looked older than her years, her eyes heavy with the fatigue of someone who had walked for a lifetime inside her own guilt. The children were asleep. Cato was away, and she sat alone, wondering if peace would ever again fit inside her chest. A faint knock on the door broke her thoughts. It was too late for visitors, but the rain made it feel as though the world outside was asking for shelter. She rose slowly and opened the door. Before her stood a woman draped in a dark shawl, her face partly hidden. Yet her eyes carried something Zawadi recognized immediately. A memory, a reflection, an old wound. The woman spoke in a calm, steady voice filled with a serenity that frightened her. "May I come in?" she asked. Zawadi, without knowing why, simply nodded and stepped aside. The visitor entered, pulled back her hood, and time stopped. The blue dress, the familiar features, the same gentle glow in her eyes. It was Amina alive standing before her. For a moment, the world fell silent. Even the rain dared not continue. Zawadi stepped back, trembling like a leaf in the wind. "No, it can't be," she stammered. "I saw you disappear. The river took you." Amina looked at her with a mix of compassion and sorrow. "The river took who I was. What returned is what remained of me." Zadi collapsed to her knees, burying her face in her hands, crying as though tears could erase the past. Her words came out broken. I didn't mean to. It was a moment, just an instant. I regretted it the very same second." Amina stood still, silent, tears streaming down her face. What she saw before her was no longer the proud, envious woman of youth, but a broken soul, hollowed out by her own sin. "Why, Zawadi?" she asked softly. "I loved you like a sister." So Wee lifted her face, eyes red, hands reaching out as if to plead. "I loved you too, Amina, but I lost myself. I grew up hearing that you were the light and I was the shadow. And one day the shadow wanted to sheen, even if it meant extinguishing the light." Silence followed, thick, heavy, filled with everything the years had left unsaid. Amina took a deep breath, stepped closer, and placed a hand on her cousin's shoulder. "The river almost took me, but God brought me back to see this. Not to condemn you, but to free you from what has chained you." Outside, thunder rolled and the rain grew stronger. The children woke from the noise and called for their mother. Zoe tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Amina helped her sit, and together they stayed silent, watching the fire dance in the hearth. It was as if the entire past was burning there, slowly turning pain into ash. "Zawadi," broke the silence with a rough, trembling voice. "I see you every night. You call to me, and I wake asking for forgiveness. Amina looked at her and said, It isn't me who calls the conscience. I forgave you the day the river spared me. The words sounded like both freedom and sentence. Jowie began to cry again, not in despair this time, but with a kind of exhaustion that resembled peace. Why did you come back, Amina? She asked between sobs. The answer came softly, without haste, because no one sleeps in peace until forgiveness is spoken aloud. Cato arrived soon after, frozen in place at the sight of the woman alive before him. His face went pale, the past rushing back in full. Amina greeted him with a serene nod, and he, unable to speak, fell to his knees. The silence in that house felt like that of a chapel. The children, wide-eyed, watched, unaware that they were witnessing a miracle. Amina's voice was steady as she turned to him. I didn't return to reclaim anything. I returned so that the river would stop calling. When she finally said goodbye, Zawadi tried to speak, but no words came. Amina touched her forehead gently and said only, What the water took no longer needs to be returned. What matters now is what you do with what remains. She stepped out into the rain, walking toward the bridge. While Zawadi stood in the doorway, watching her cousin's figure fade into the mist, she cried, but for the first time in years, her tears tasted like relief. That night, Zoe had no nightmares. The sound of the river came again, but this time it was different, soft, calm, as though forgiveness had at last reached both shores. The next day dawned with a silence that felt sacred. The sky was still heavy with clouds, and the scent of wet earth lingered like the air after a long, bitter war has finally ended. Zawadi hadn't slept much. She had spent the night seated by the fire, replaying every word Amina had said. And as Thiessen rose, she felt her soul burned for so long, begin at last to call. It was time to say aloud what she had carried in secret for so many years. That morning, Amina returned wearing the same blue cloth as the night before. Her gaze calm as ever, but now with a new light in her eyes. The light of someone who had come to close a chapter. She found Zawadi in the yard on her knees washing her children's clothes. The sound of water hitting the fabric echoed the memory of the river. The two women locked eyes, and in that moment, which felt like a lifetime, Amina took a step forward and said with quiet resolve, It's time, Zawadi. Zawadi dropped the cloth, her hands trembling, and fell to her knees. The tears came before the words Amina. I had to live all these years to understand what I did. I thought I could bear it. I thought I could hide it, but the river never let me. It still calls me every night like it's waiting. It was me, Amina. I was the one who pushed you. I envied you. I wanted you gone. And the moment the water swallowed you, I was lost too. The sound of a confession swept through the yard like a prayer, like a scream, like a release. Amina stood in silence for a moment. There was no anger on her face, only sorrow and compassion. And when she finally spoke, her voice was gentle yet full of truth. Asterisk Zawadi. I already knew. The heart feels what words never say. From the moment I came back to life on the riverbank, I understood. Hatred didn't kill you. It imprisoned you. And God didn't bring me back to punish you. He brought me back to free you. Zaidi sobbed, her whole body shaking. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve the life I have. Everything I built is the shadow of the wrong I did. Amina knelt before her, gripped her hands, and replied, Asterisk. The pain you gave me no longer belongs to me. I gave it to the river the day it returned me to the earth. I haven't come to collect anything. I came to return the weight you've carried. Because forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's release. Asterisk. A soft breeze swept through the yard, scattering the leaves. The sun broke through the clouds, and for a moment, light rested on them both like a blessing. Zawadi closed her eyes, let the tears fall, and felt her heart beat for the first time without the weight of fear. How can you be like this? She asked, barely a whisper. I stole everything from you, Amina. Your love, your life, your name. Amina looked up at the sky before answering. You didn't steal anything God couldn't return. What I lost became the path to what I needed to find. While you drowned in guilt, I learned that life is reborn even from the deepest waters. And now if you want, you can be reborn too. They remained kneeling for a long while. The silence wasn't empty. It was a prayer. Amina stood first, helped Sawi to her feet, and said, live. Not to make up for anything, but to serve. Let your remorse become a bridge, not a prison. Zawadi nodded, her face soaked in tears. I will try. Amina smiled gently. Don't try, Zadi. Walk. The river doesn't ask if the water can flow. It simply flows. Before leaving, Amina looked around the yard. The trees, the same patch of sky she'd seen so many times as a child. Every detail finally seemed at peace. She walked to the door, but Zoidi called to her one last time. Amina, her voice was strong, no longer afraid. Thank you for coming back. Amina turned, and the smile she gave was the same as the girl who once picked flowers by the river. I never really left, she said, and walked away. Zoidi stood alone in the yard. Now the sun was shining in full. The water trickling from the wash basin formed thin streams down into the earth, as if the river itself had sent its final message. The confession had set them both free, one from the weight of guilt, the other from the burden of pain. And in that moment, the past dissolved in the same silence where it had once begun, leaving only the soft sound of running water, like a promise of a new beginning. The next morning, the village of Kimblea awoke to news that felt like a miracle. Amina, the young woman everyone believed dead, had returned. The rumor spread like wildfire through dry grass. Women came to their doors, men set down their tools, and children ran through these streets, repeating her name like an old song. People gathered in front of the old house of Nay, Amina's mother. And when she saw her daughter stepping through the gate, time seemed to stop. NY fell to her knees, eyes brimming with tears, and whispered only, "My God, my daughter." Their embrace was long, silent, filled with everything that words can't reach. Amina came to live there again, but not as before. She was a different woman now, serene, mature, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the visible. She never spoke in detail about what had happened, or where she had been. She would simply say, "The river didn't take me. It gave me back." Little by little, she returned to her routines. She resumed teaching the village children, helped the elders in their fields, and healed small wounds with herbs and kind words. The villagers began calling her the survivor, but Amina would gently correct them. "I didn't survive. I was reborn." Meanwhile, Zawadi withdrew into solitude. After her confession, guilt became remorse, and remorse became a path. She began living humbly. She gave her jewelry to the house of prayer, sold many of her possessions, and dedicated herself to caring for the sick and the widows. At first, the villagers were skeptical of her transformation, but they soon realized it was not a performance. It was a tired heart that had finally found the truth. When Cato learned the whole story, he left. He said few words before departing. A lie can last a lifetime, but the truth always arrives at the right time. He left without anger, only with the silence of a man who also needed to begin again. Time passed, and the village learned to live with what had happened. The two cousins, once a symbol of tragedy, had become a symbol of forgiveness. Sometimes Amina would visit Zoadi at dusk. They sat together on the porch, watching the horizon. They didn't need to say much. The past was still there, but it no longer hurt. It was like a scar no one tries to hide, a reminder of where pain once lived and where healing was born. The villagers would say that even the river had changed. Its waters, once dark and loud, now flowed clearer, gentler, as if its soul had been cleansed too. Some swore that on quiet nights a soft shimmer danced on its surface, as if the white flowers Amina loved had never stopped blooming. The river, once a witness to envy and sin, had become a mirror of reconciliation. Nirai, now elderly, would often repeat to her grandchildren a proverb that spread throughout the village. The waters can hide evil for a time, but the truth always rises to the surface. And every time she said it, she looked at the two cousins, one with acerine face, the other with hands worn from serving, and saw in them the true meaning of divine justice. One morning, Amina walked to the bridge where it all began. The wind stirred the leaves, and the river sang a song of peace. Jot. She stopped in the center, looked into the water, and whispered a short prayer. May the hearts of the wronged never drown, and may the guilty learn to swim toward forgiveness. She dropped a white flower into the current, and watched it float away, light, calm, as if it knew the path. Behind her, Zawadi approached in silence. They stood side by side, looking down at the river that now united instead of divided. Amina smiled. Zawadi smiled back. Neither needed to speak. The water spoke for them. There, between the murmur of the river and the scent of flowers, the cycle closed. As they returned to the village, a soft, blessed rain began to fall, and the people said it was the sky washing away the last trace of the tragedy. Since then, the elders tell the story to the younger generations, always ending with the same truth. Envy destroys, but the truth always rises to the surface. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. That really helps us keep bringing you real and emotional stories like this one. Thank you for being part of our